Morning, everybody. Welcome. We have a very interesting case which came up late last year, and it was on the City of Cape Town using the risk of reputational damage as a disqualification criteria. And there's a lot to consider in this one around issues of policy and lawfulness and fairness and a whole range of issues. And very pleased that Chris Wilcock has said that he would help unpack this for us. And so Chris is a very well educated individual. The only criticism I have is that most of that has been in Stellenbosch. Um, but he's based up in Gauteng. He has provided previously some input on webinars like this. He is a regular contributor. And what is quite unique about Chris on this particular platform is he actually works for a supplier very closely with the supplier and, of course, many of their um, public sector customers, if you like. And so thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for agreeing to do this one. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Sean. Shall I kick off? This is a case, as you said, late last year. It was heard by a full bench of the Western Cape High Court, and the decision was a unanimous one of the three judges that were sitting on the bench. It was heard on 12 and 13 November, so you can see it went over 2 days, so it's quite complex. There was quite a lot of papers and argument. And judgment was handed down literally 2 weeks later on the 26th of November. So it was quite a quick judgment and, refreshing change from sometimes where it takes months and months to get the judgment. Now, I must apologize. I've broken all the PowerPoint rules. So there are more points per slide than there should be. I think the maximum recommended is something like 5. And there's a
This
lot
is
of
not a
work.
problem.
The reason I've done this, Sean, is that I know people often ask, can we share the slides? And I'm very happy to do that. But sharing slides with just cryptic 1 and 2 point bullets really doesn't help anybody. So I've written it almost like a poster presentation. But don't fear, I won't subject you to death by PowerPoint. I'm not going to read each and every word on the slides. I've put the information there and then I'll talk around it. So one of the reasons why this case caught my attention is, there've been a lot of cases about people being, disqualified from bids because of their own track record or poor reputation. And it's generally to do with delivery, failures on previous projects. And this one is a bit different. This one is about the risk to the city itself rather than to the project, as it were, of non-delivery. So it's also relevant because of the apparent difficulty of getting transgressors debarred or restricted on the National Treasury database. Now, I read an article recently I have referred to it in there, from Sale and Du Toit, written in November 2023. They looked at the database of restricted suppliers, and there were 179 entries listed at that date. I again looked at this a bit more recently, and there's now 288. But what makes that more interesting is that there's very few entities who actually blacklist companies or individuals. At the time of writing this article, as I say, November 2023, there were only 54, I beg your pardon, there were only a limited number of people who put people onto this database. Ekurhuleni Metro at that stage led the list with 54 blacklistings. City of Cape Town had 15, and Western Cape Department of Health had 28. There are very few, only 26 state entities have actually blacklisted companies. And of the 257 municipalities, only 8 have taken such actions, which really shows that not many people are getting onto this blacklist. We read daily about all the things that are happening, and yet there don't seem to be much of comebacks for people who are transgressing. So this is a case where the database wasn't used. It was merely this company who the city determined could be damaging to their reputation, and they then disqualified them. Then another point is that where there's cases tainted by impropriety, we always have a perception that the bidder who was awarded the bid will fail to deliver or will give poor quality, or fail to deliver at all. And there'll be money paid out and nothing received in return. And these are public funds, so it's a very sensitive thing. That's not always the case. Sometimes there's impropriety, but there is still like excellent quality delivered. And I only have to think about those World Cup stadiums, and I've got a picture to show you. So these are world-class stadiums, and they're wonderful stadiums, but there was, as we know, collusion involved, and the state's estimated to have paid between 10 and 30% more. They have managed to claw some of that back in settlements made with the offending companies. Then I'll show you now what I mean, for a lighter note. And then on this one, nothing turned on submission or non-submission of documents, nor any other impropriety. There was no evidence that bribes were offered or anything like that. It was merely the company itself that the city felt they didn't want to do business with, and we'll get to that. So yeah, the crisp issue that the court had to decide here was simply the potential of reputational harm to the city itself. And this is important, as was, described in detail in the actual judgment. The city relies on funding, from the private sector, lending and things like this, and they can't afford to have a bad reputation. So yeah, the stadiums in question, or the one stadium, this is Soccer City in Johannesburg. Absolutely magnificent stadium. You can see this is a photo that I took during a game, this one. Sorry, I've gone too far. So this is the inside of the stadium. This is the outside, probably 5 minutes before load shedding hit in, because you can see there's a lot of lights there. So yeah, you can sometimes have collusion and impropriety, but still get a excellent. But be that as it may, it doesn't excuse what took place, and it's not right. So there's very little case law on the use of value or previous performance or reputation. The only two that sort of I'm talking about today, well, I won't really talk about them, was Renaissance Security and Cleaning versus Rustenburg Local Municipality. In this case, the municipality disqualified a bidder because of previous poor performance, but they slipped up because they didn't have their paperwork in place, and their own policy stated that a bidder could only be disqualified for previous poor performance if this was recorded in writing. In this case, everyone agreed that they had performed poorly. In fact, the guard that was allocated to the mayor's house was caught sleeping, which is never a good thing. And but the court held that the disqualification was not valid because there was nothing in writing. Then the second one was a more recent case, Aventino Eco Troopers. The disqualification of the bidder was because of previous misrepresentations. In this case, the Supreme Court of Appeal upheld the disqualification. So the defense that Aventino Eco Troopers put forward was that they weren't listed on the database of restricted supply of bidders. But this was actually due to a settlement reached. They reached a settlement whereby they admitted guilt or did something, I'm not sure. And then they weren't blacklisted. But for that settlement, they would have actually been blacklisted. So the court upheld that disqualification. And as we'll see now on the TCC case, this company is not blacklisted, but the city was still able to disqualify them. Right, just very briefly, the facts. These two tenders, I've called them for simplicity, 310Q and 27Q. They are actually referred to like that in the judgment itself, just for simplicity because they had long names and numbers. It was for various building works. Again, I stress there was no question that TCC couldn't do the work or wouldn't do the work or would do poor work. This was purely, it had nothing to do with their previous track record. It was purely about the reputational risk. And initially, in fact, the bid evaluation committees for each of the tenders independently recommended that TCC actually be awarded the contracts. But then between the BEC report recommendation and the actual award, some things happened, which resulted in the BACs taking two decisions, one for tender 310Q. They decided to cancel that one because TCC had in fact been the only responsive tenderer, and they didn't want to award it to them, so they merely cancelled the tender because there were nobody to award it to. We're not going to talk much about that one because the court dismissed the application on 310 on the grounds of mootness, and it's not relevant to our further discussion. Mootness itself is an interesting copy and also very relevant to public procurement. I'm sure some people may have heard of the King v. Moseme case, where the court upheld the challenge to the bid, but didn't cancel the tender because it was about 90% complete, and they said, well, it's pointless to cancel the tender now. These guys must just finish the work. So mootness is very much a burning issue in public procurement because it often happens that by the time the case gets to court or goes through the appeal process, the work is already done and there's no point of proceeding. There have been talk, I believe, about having special tender courts, but there's some opposition to that in itself. But to come back to the matter at hand, so on 27Q, which is the one that we're interested in today, the BAC resolved, notwithstanding the BEC's recommendation, they said, no, we can't award this bid to TCC because of the risk to the city of reputational harm. And TCC applied for a review of that decision to the High Court of the Western Cape, and the court dismissed the application for reasons that we'll talk about now. This was just quickly an extract from the City of Cape Town's SCM policy. As always in these cases, if your policy is not in place and not clear, you're probably going to lose your case. But yeah, they had their ducks in a row. They've listed all the possible reasons why they should reserve its right not to register a vendor, or not to make a final award, or revoke a final award, or even cancel a contract where the implementation may result in reputational risk or harm. Now, you might ask, how can they cancel a contract? Because normally this has to go on judicial review with a public tender. But I just want to show you just very quickly this very simple diagram. So if there's an awarded contract in progress and some impropriety comes to light, there's two ways that you can do it. If it was during the bidding process and the tender award was tainted by irregularity, then you need a judicial review under PAJA, or not necessarily PAJA, but needs to be a judicial review. But if it happens during execution, this here is public law, and this here is private law, law of contract. So if it happens during the execution of the contract, the organ of state can actually cancel the contract. It can be for poor performance, it can be for whatever. And then the law of contract applies, and that's private law. But to go back to the previous slide, so what happened here was there were some happenings, which I'll talk about shortly. And there was a lot of media reporting about this, which is what they used, this 106.2.4 of their supply chain management policy. So they based their disqualification or the right not to award the tender to TCC because of the negative media reports. Right, then if we go to what actually happened. So when this tender was running, there were allegations made by external complainants. These were kind of activists, active in the community, anti-corruption activists. They complained to the city and also to the police of the fraudulent actions that they were accusing of, they were accusing TCC of. As a result of that complaint, SAPS carried out a search and seizure operation and in fact arrested a director of TCC and took this later charge in the Bellville court. And it's known as the Bellville case because you'll see later there was another case again. But due to delays in getting the case to court and preparing a charge sheet and the like, the case was removed from the roll by the magistrate. But the charges were not actually withdrawn. Those charges were still standing at the time of this this whole saga. At the same time, the city didn't wait. They conducted their own investigations into the allegations, but they concluded that there was no substance in the allegation. There was no evidence of wrongdoing. What the TCC had actually been accused of was inflating invoices and putting in invoices for work they hadn't done. But the city couldn't find evidence, hard evidence of that. They furthermore did consider whether they should blacklist TCC for abuse of the SCM policy, but the municipal manager just found that there was again not evidence to blacklist. Furthermore, it's standard practice in the City of Cape Town. I'm not sure if there are any City of Cape Town people here today, but they do a due diligence audit. I know this because we've been audited a couple of times when we were identified as the preferred bidder. So whenever someone's identified as a preferred bidder, it's standard practice to do a due diligence audit. I would imagine it's only for bigger bids and not for just smaller ones. But anyway, this was done in this case, and the due diligence audit highlighted also risks. And however, the determined that the allegation not been proven and they weren't blacklisted. They were also afforded the opportunity, which is proper and correct, to respond to the various allegations. They had denied these allegations. Then the saga took a turn for the worst from TCC's point of view anyway. Two of their directors were arrested and criminally charged in this was the Cape Town Magistrates Court, and that's why it's called the Cape Town case. The previous arrest did attract some media attention, but these arrests were very widely reported in the local media. And I can only imagine the city thought that what's going to happen if while all this media coverage is going on, they also read that we've appointed these guys to 2 tenders. So that certainly played a big role in their decision. So TCC were again offered the opportunity to respond to the allegations. They responded, again denying allegations, and they disputed the application of the reputational risk clause. City's legal advisor provided an opinion to the BEC where he said that this would be a risk, and the BAC then decided to not award the tender to TCC. TCC followed the internal processes. They appealed to the municipal manager, who dismissed the appeal. And that would have been a Section 62 appeal rather than the MFMA appeal. TCC then applied for a judicial review of the 27Q decision, which brings us to today's discussion. So just to look at the judge, I think I've gone too far, yeah? Yeah. So just to summarize quickly the allegations, there were allegations made, yeah, I've done this one. Then the arrests, as I said, were widely reported. And TCC went through all this thing where they were awarded. Then they took it to court, and this is where we stand now. TCC raised no less than 9 grounds in their review application. These were wide-ranging, from unlawfulness of the reputational risk clause. They complained about procedural unfairness. They spoke about arbitrary, capricious decisions. They said the municipal manager was functus officio. They accused the city of manufacturing ex post facto, after the fact reasons, and all of these things. Remember, for administrative action to be valid, there must be reasons made for the decision, but you can't dream up the decision, the reasons after the decision was made. And too often we see public entities landing themselves in hot water because they make a decision and then later on scramble around looking for the reasons only after the decision is challenged. Anyway, bottom line, the court dismissed each and every challenge by TCC. The judgment runs into something like 46 pages, and I don't think we need to go into all of that. But in short, the court held that the city was entitled to disqualify TCC. Despite it having considered, and this was one of the arguments of TCC, they said, yeah, you're disqualifying us, but you allowing bids from other companies which have in the past been associated with unsavory practices. They mentioned Warren Inglis, H&I Construction, and Sakikaya Suppliers. But the court dismissed that because they said those were past, and these type of cases are considered on a time and fact manner. So it depends on what's happening now and what the facts are. They said the H&I and Sakikaya was in the past. Those were done and dusted. There was no further risk to the city of reputational risk. So that's the judgment in short, but it's quite an interesting case reading the whole case. There's a few myths that were busted and some little takeaways that we can look at. And it's the first time that I'm aware that a procuring entity has used reputational risk to disqualify a bid and it to be upheld in court. So what we see here one of the things that TCC argued, they said, yeah, these cases are still ongoing in the magistrates court, but you've presumed us guilty, whereas you're supposed to presume us innocent until we're proven guilty. The judge pointed out something very interesting, and he said there's no merit in TCC's complaint because the presumption of innocence is only on criminal proceedings. It doesn't apply to a civil case like this one. So it's not a basis for claiming an entitlement to be awarded a tender just because you haven't yet been proven guilty. And this is very important because we all know how long cases can drag through the courts, especially if they get appealed. So the city couldn't wait for 5 years to hear if they were going to be found guilty or not. So they acted, which is proper and correct. And another myth is that perception should not be relevant in administrative acts, only facts or actual factual things. But perceptions are important. At 45 in the judgment, Davies AJ said, perceptions matter. The public is entitled to expect the city to be above reproach in its dealings and to refrain from association with those who stand accused. You'll note he didn't say, this underlining is my emphasis. He didn't say found guilty of or convicted of. He said who stand accused of criminal charges. Then another thing, people often think, well, if we're not sure about something or something could happen in the future, let's get a court judgment on that. But the courts don't entertain that. So courts can't be, the truth is they can't be approached to prevent a future mischief. Davies AJ had quite a lot to say about this, which we needn't go into detail now, but he quoted with approval a previous case. Says courts should not decide matters which are abstract or academic. And he said a matter is not justiciable if it no longer presents an existing or live controversy. And courts do not have jurisdiction to hear a matter which may affect a hypothetical future case. Those are his quote marks. Just as an aside for the legal people will know this, an appellate court does have discretion to hear a moot case if it believes that there are issues of public importance. But this was a court of first instance. Although being a full bench, it was still the first time this matter had gone to the High Court. So the court did not have jurisdiction to hear a moot case. What is also interesting here, and what judges, I forget which one, but it's been said more than once. The judge remarked rather acidly, if you want legal advice, go to your legal advisor, don't come to us, well, it's not our job. Then TCC also said, but if you're going to disqualify us now, does that mean we can never bid for future work? But what the court held at 32 was that a decision regarding reputational risks, and I quote, it's fact and time bound. So the city can't, having disqualified TCC once doesn't mean they're permanently disqualified. They will have to do the same investigation each time they want to invoke the reputational risk clause. So in a way, this is a less draconian measure than blacklisting them, because then they're on that blacklist for 5 to 10 years, and it's a devil of a job to get off that. So in this case, they said only you can't do now because of all the media publicity. Later on, if the publicity dies down or the charges are withdrawn or you're not found guilty, then you're welcome to bid again. The court also said you have to have a reputational interest to protect, and there must be a rational link between the risk and the means chosen. So it doesn't mean you can always, it has to be current. So this is not a forever and a day judgment. Okay, you'll be relieved to hear we're getting near the end. So what did the city do right? So I think this is of interest to all the people in the audience or in this forum who are pondering whether they can disqualify somebody and how they can do it. So this is really a case study of how to deal with matters like this. And the city followed, there was nothing that they could be faulted on here. So first of all, their policy was in place. The policy must be in place and it must be clear. And I showed you the extract from the policy earlier. It listed each and every point clearly of what they can use. Then they conducted an investigation which must reveal a current risk and it must be based on facts. In TCC's application, they used a lot of inferences, and the court said, no, you've inferred things, but the city's case is based on facts. And, as we know, facts will always trump inferences. I've just realized I've used a sentence with facts and Trump in the same sentence. I apologize for that. To use reputational risk to disqualify a bid, there must be a reputational interest and there must be a rational link. It's at 47 in the judgment, if you want to look up the explanation of that. The party who stands to be disqualified should be afforded a reasonable opportunity to make representations. This is the well-known Audi rule, Audi alterum partem, which means you must hear the other side of the story. And the city gave TCC ample opportunity, more than once, to respond to the allegations. And then, very important, don't wait for the conclusion of the criminal or other proceedings. So don't wait until the person is blacklisted on the National Treasury database. You can't rely on that database. It could take a long time. And don't wait for criminal or other proceedings. You must act now. By the time that the criminal proceedings have concluded, it's way too late. The contract would have been completed already. The city went through a very rigorous process. They had reasons and they kept records. So every time there was a challenge to something they did, they had the facts at their fingertips. They had the records. They could show that they had followed the procedure. So that's what you need to do if you want to disqualify a bidder. I think I've gone over the 30 minutes that we normally have, and after that there must be discussion. So I've just, obviously the discussion is open. I welcome people to raise whatever points or clarities or questions or opinions that they want to give. But I'll just put down some questions, some food for thought. So we're talking now in the negative. So if a bidder has a poor reputation or they represent a reputational risk to the procuring institution, they can be disqualified. But could this be extended? Could this logic and reasoning be extended to favor bidders with excellent reputation? So if you've got a bidder that you know is going to give you the absolute best stadium in the world, and there's another bidder who will give you an okay stadium, and the prices are much the same. There is here and there bits and pieces of case law, but it's mostly just statements, not the actual reason for the decision, which seems to think that if so, how would you do this if you did want to look at someone's good reputation rather than, because, once you've passed the functionality hurdle, those points fall away and it's then only price and preference. Could the new regulations reintroduce the system used before Sizabonke Civils, which is what disqualified that system? Those who were involved in the sector before 2010 will remember that often the points for price could be split. So you could give 60, if in the 80-20 system, you could give 50 points for price and 30 points for functionality. But that case overturned that, and since then you can't do that. Then I've just quoted my references here just for correctness and